All right. Welcome everyone to today's event where we're going to be talking about mentorship in action, how institutions build stronger communities through peer mentorship. My name is Christine. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Mentor Collective, and I will be supporting you throughout any technical questions. I'll be the background. If you have any issues coming up, please let me know. We're going to have a great presentation on Mentor Collective's thought leadership around developing an institution-wide culture of mentorship. All right, let's get started. Jess, if you can move forward to the next slide here. All right, so in this slide here, I'm going to just talk about some best practices. That way we can have the best virtual seamless experience. When you're coming in, your audio is on mute and your camera is also off. We do ask that, and that's just because of Zoom webinar function. We also ask that you adjust your video to speaker view. That way you can see who's talking and then at the time where everyone is having a discussion today. And also at this time, go ahead and drop your name and introductions in the chat. We'd love to know who's talking with us today and even maybe your LinkedIn. That way you can connect with your fellow colleagues that's on this call today. Jess, if you can move forward to the next one. And please, we love to know your reactions. Zoom emojis are enabled. So if you're loving something, give us that love. If you find something surprising, give us a surprise reaction. Otherwise, regardless, we want you to drop any questions you have in the chat, any reactions, and also utilizing the Q&A feature. We're going to be having all these great discussions and we want your questions. Other than that, we are ready to get started. I'm going to kick it off to our host today, Jess. If you can go ahead and kick it off.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming today. My name is Jess Kitt. I'm our director of our partner success team here at Mentor Collective. And what that means is that I oversee and have the privilege of working with the team of partner onboarding and partner success managers who work with our institutions to implement and consistently use Mentor Collective to augment and support their mentorship programs on campus. So I'm excited to be here today, more excited to talk to you and introduce our wonderful panelists here today. Each of them has worked with Mentor Collective as well as our founding members of their mentorship programs. So would love to make sure that we have you all know who they are, a little bit about their experiences, their connections to their program, and you're going to be hearing from all of them today about a variety of their experiences, about the journeys their institutions have been on in relation to mentorship. And we know things are changing really rapidly in higher education. So I'm so thrilled to have this wonderful team of experts here to really share their knowledge with you. So I'm going to first have Dr. Morgan from Lincoln University introduce himself. So Dr. Morgan, I'll let you say hello to the crowd here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Tobias Morgan. I serve as the Chief Student Affairs Officer and Dean of Students here at Lincoln University of Missouri.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Jordan DiPentima, I'll give it over to you from Florida Atlantic.
Hi, everybody. I am Jordan DiPentima, although, Jess, you said my last name so much more beautifully than I usually say it. I'm Director of New Student Transitions and Family Engagement. I've been at Florida Atlantic for about a decade now.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Nelson Barahona, I'll give it over to you, also from Florida, the Florida Atlantic team.
Thanks, Jess. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nelson Marahon. I serve as the Associate Director for New Student Transition and Family Engagement. So I have the privilege of working with Jordan every day and more of the day-to-day of our mentoring programs here.
Wonderful. And then last but not least, Diamond Wilder from University of Michigan Flint. Diamond, would you love to say hi?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Diamond Wilder. I am our Success Mentorship Program Manager here on campus. We have been in a wonderful relationship with Mentor Collective for probably the past 4 or 5 years now. So I'm excited to speak more about our program and our experience.
Fantastic. Well, before we get into each of these wonderful team members, their experiences, their connection to mentorship, their vision for what the future holds for their institution, and their personal perspective and opinions, we wanted to take a few moments, just a few, to level set what we, I think, probably all know in higher education around mentorship. And I think that shared knowledge is a helpful place to begin the story for today. So the agenda we have is we've already accomplished our introductions. We'll give a brief overview of peer mentorship and our understanding. And then mostly we'll have these wonderful panelists talk about their experiences. So, to level set, what we know about mentorship in relation to persistence and retention is that we know that persistence has over 30 years of peer reviewed research, right? This is not something that is still being questioned by the community. There's academic research and studies across many areas and disciplines. We know that peer mentorship can decrease summer melt, especially for historically marginalized groups. We also know that there is a positive relationship between peer mentorship and persistence, especially for cohorts like first generation students, which you'll hear about today. So it's really important when we talk about how things are changing in higher education and, of course, the different dynamics that exist across the country, that we also remember that this positive relationship exists for many different groups of students, and mentorship for all is something that we'll also talk about today. We also know that mentorship has an impact on term to term persistence. So oftentimes we think about mentorship just as it connects to, of course, year to year retention, but really, especially when we're talking about transfer students, when we're talking about first year students who are coming in with different levels of academic preparedness, that persistence cannot be overlooked when we're talking about fall to spring, or if you're on a quarter, certainly your quarter system as well. We also know that students who experience peer mentorship have a higher level of belonging. Now, certainly, of course, during the pandemic, there was an extreme level and extreme focus on the sense of belonging that students had at prospective institutions and their connection. But also, as many institutions are offering hybrid levels of learning, who are supporting more and more commuter students, we also want to make sure that we aren't forgetting this sense of belonging and connection that students of all ages have in connection to our physical and hybrid campuses. Lastly, we also know that the sense of belonging is also connected to academic progress, and by that I mean increased academic progress. So graduation rates between a 4-year and a 6-year completion rate are higher for students who experience some level of mentorship, whether it be a peer, alumni, or industry mentor. They also show reduced signs of distress, so can have a higher level of what we might think of as resilience and academic preparedness and self-efficacy. So the ability not necessarily to block themselves from challenges, but be able to experience a challenge and find resource utilization on campus to be able to problem solve what they might encounter as challenges throughout their academic and personal career, as those, of course, are closely connected. What I think is also really powerful about what I hope that you hear, and I think you will hear from our panelists today, is how there is an underlying thread of a culture of mentorship at each of these institutions. Now, that also means that this changed and evolved over the course of time, right? It takes commitment, it takes each of these layers of what you're seeing on your screen here. But it means that mentorship doesn't just happen one day. It means that we have to be strategic. We have to use data in a way that helps us understand how mentorship and our students are evolving over the course of time. We also need it to be something that is resourced. Now, you're going to hear, I think every one of the panelists here today say that resources and data-driven decision making is really important, and how their mentorship programs have evolved over the course of time. Most of the time, and I think Jordan, you'll speak to this, that data also helped increase the investment the university was making in mentorship, but that didn't always start from day one. Now, you'll also hear today how mentorship is really visible at the institutions. So not only the folks who are, of course, on this panel today, but also people that they cross-collaborated with across departments, across divisions, within their senior leadership on campus. So it was not something that only the 4 individuals that you're hearing from today talked about at their institution. Lastly, you'll also hear about how a culture of mentorship, when it is created and sustained, is participant centered. And what that means is that these folks are always calibrating and refocusing back on what their students are telling them, be that mentees, be that if they have mentors who are students, or if they have mentors who may be someone who is volunteering in their mentorship program outside of the university, like a career or alumni or an industry mentor. That feedback that they infuse has also allowed their programs to shift and grow and change over the course of time as that's needed. All of these things, when they are happening together in a wonderful environment, of course, create a strong culture of mentorship. But that doesn't mean that it is perfect from day one. And that also doesn't mean that there aren't always ways to grow and learn from each other. So without further ado, I'm going to move into our panelist discussion. But I also wanted to mention that if you're interested in learning more about a culture of mentorship, about the practices that the panelists talk about today, Mentor Collective has a white paper that talks about each of the aspects of a culture of mentorship, institutions who have shared how they have done this at their respective institution, including some of the folks here today. So if you're looking for a takeaway from today, not only the wonderful advice and expertise from our panelists, but you like something in writing, Christine is going to put in the chat a link where you can download it, read it, send it to a colleague, find some inspiration from others. We're so privileged to be able to share expertise from the over 200 mentorship programs that we work with across the country. So excited to share that with you today. As we get our panelists geared up to go, and I'll ask them to come off mute as they can, Christine is also going to launch a poll to ask you all, do you have a mentorship program already at your institution? It's just a simple yes/no question. If you're not sure, that's okay too. Choose the choice that moves you. But this will also help our panelists also understand how many folks that are in the audience today have mentorship programs and perhaps already have a foundation, or if you're looking to start one, or if you're looking to maybe grow your mentorship program, maybe it's something very small and boutique and you're looking to scale that in a mentorship for all model. So if you wouldn't mind answering that quick question on the screen here, we'll give everyone a couple of seconds and me a chance to give a quick sip of water. And then Christine, I'll ask you to share those poll results out so you all can see what sort of community you're joining. Oh, I love this mix here. So we can see about 54% of the attendees today do have an existing mentorship program at your institution, and about half of you do not yet. So, oh gosh, what the next 45 minutes we're going to have together for you all to hear what each of these folks has to say. So thank you so much, Christine, for sharing that. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can focus on the words and wisdom of what you're about to hear from our panelists today. So if you see me stop sharing my screen, that is intentional, don't worry. And we're going to start with our first question to the group. So I think my first question I'd love to pose, and Jordan, we'll start with you if you don't mind. How did your institution determine your structure and the scope of your peer mentorship program? What factors influence those decisions? And maybe even start with a description of the program that you and Nelson have on campus.
Yes. So ours really took off. It has existed for a long time. But in spring of 22 is when Florida Atlantic as a whole, and its leadership team specifically prioritized student engagement as a part of the holistic student experience. So a repurposed version of that program that existed for a while was called First Year Connections, and it was launched in partnership with Mentor Collection, really to center on outcomes related to retention and student belonging. So we worked hand in hand, and for any of you that were at NASPA for this panel, if you were present, I kept shouting out our director of assessment and research who was sitting in the room. So if she's on the call today, I'll do it again. But I worked hand in hand with her to really determine what our need was and what student gap wasn't retaining across the university. What we discovered, it was specifically commuter males. So really, more broadly, the initiative was a pathway to engage that population. And then in our first year, the program grew from what was about a 400 mentee program to 1,400. And then we discovered that we needed to do more than just first year connections because we had transfer students find this program on their own. So we simultaneously launched transfer connections as a result of the success of first year connections, and our commuter men were highly transfer population. So that need showed up across the university and some of the student types we weren't originally looking at. So it was really what population is not retaining, why aren't they retaining? The university is trying to engage in student success. How can we do that? And that was through two main programs that are still being overseen, and that's first year and transfer connections.
Thank you for sharing. Diamond, I saw you nodding along also as Jordan talked about the evolution of where they started and how they understood and how FIU grew. What does that look like for University of Michigan Flint for you? What are your programs? What influenced the decisions that started off these programs? Would love to hear from you, Diamond. Yeah.
I am on mute. So similarly the same. So our program structure and design was centered around like the need, like like pretty much assessing the need for this initiative. So fostering that peer mentorship, that supportive network amongst like different subpopulations within our campus community. So whether that be FIDIAC, transfer, graduate students, and also most recently our alumni. So we wanted to really like deepen that sense of belonging, increase our persistence and retention rates, particularly our students at the margins. And so ironically, similarly to Jordan, like this came at, like it was good timing as far as implementation of this program because it caused that progressive shift in the program where students were able to interact and engage with one another, especially like after COVID. Like that was a need for our campus. And so it allowed for our students to create those informal hallway conversations, but online, and then give them the autonomy to show up how they wanted to as years progressed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Diamond. It makes me think of how the culture of mentorship, that resonates around it being participant centered and allowing students choice and autonomy to create mentorship relationships with how they need and the frequency and what they need them to look like. Dr. Morgan, how about your program? What sort of the factors that influence the creation of those programs and the hopeful outcomes that you might have at your institution?
Yeah, so so here at Lincoln, I think it kind of was a different spin for us here. So maybe my first or second week at Lincoln, it was kind of like a voluntold initiative from my president. He called us into a meeting and kind of went over it with us. And then the following day, I met with the Mentor Collective team over Zoom and kind of got more details and information as far as what the program entailed. And so we pulled together a team at the institution, which was representatives from student affairs, student success, institutional research, alumni affairs, and career services was a vital component of that team as well. And so working with everyone, we kind of tried to put some information together that would kind of direct our path as we kind of structured and figured out which way to go during our trial run for this first cohort. And so it's been really a great resource as far as connecting our students with alumni. And so our main goal this year, starting off the year as we were doing our summer planning, was to increase alumni engagement with our students here on campus. And so the Mentor Collective has been a instrumental component in that engagement process to bring our alumni back to campus, to engage our alumni, through career exploration. And so it's been a wealth of excitement on campus with our students, and we're gearing up for our next cohort now.
Absolutely. Dr. Morgan, I think that we've all gotten pulled into ideating conversations with senior leaders and projects that both are in line with the vision, but also have an opportunity to transform something that we didn't even know could exist. When you talk about your career program, can you talk a little bit about the population of students that serves on campus? Is that all students? Is that particularly first year students? Is that evolving for you?
So yeah, so we started off with just our first year students, and midway through our trial run, we thought to include our second year students as well. And so we did that intentionally because sophomore year experience, like many of us know, is really the time for career exploration with our students. And so wanted to really dive deep into that. So we expanded the program to our sophomores on campus as well. And so that was very beneficial, especially for our team in career services, because they were able to increase their numbers with the program that they were doing alongside with the alumni. And so now moving forward at the end of our first cohort this year, we're beginning our registration and recruitment for cohort number 2. So our first year students who engage in the program this year are being moved into their second year with their alumni mentors. And so we're actually recruiting our incoming first year students now until August to engage in the program as well. So we started this past weekend with our open house. And so we were able to get a lot of parents who were interested in the program and then a lot of the first year students as well.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mhm.
Now that we're on this topic of engaging and hearing feedback directly from the participants in the program, I'd love to
Mhm.
pose our next question around what strategies have you all used to select and train peer mentors to make sure that, and you all talked about these different populations of mentees you're working with, first year students, transfer students, oh gosh, even upperclassmen, right? So what sort of strategies did you use to recruit, select, and train mentors? Nelson, I'm going to start with you because I know that you all are so enthusiastic and appreciative of the time that your students invest in your mentorship program. So can you talk a little bit about that for your mentors?
Yeah, of course. So one common theme y'all are gonna hear me talk a lot about is like campus partners and like those relationships. And that is important because as we know with students, they want to connect with students that they have connections to, right? Like they want to meet people that are like them. And like Jordan made mention, like our mentee recruitment was very targeted, right? We were trying to hit specific groups. And we kind of use those same groups in order to help recruit mentors. So instead of just us like blasting out emails through Mentor Collective, being like, hey, we're recruiting mentors at this point, what we really do is work with our campus partners to do more targeted like invitations, right? So like the first generation, which is one of our big groups that we were trying to cover, first generation commuters, we'll work with those groups that those students are usually involved with and have those professionals send out emails for them, right? When it comes to recruitment, both on the mentee and the mentor side. International students, same thing. But we really work with said offices and then we use a lot of the opportunities that Mentor Collective presents within their training and try to add some additional information about our direct institution and some of the campus partners that help with like our flag program specifically when trying to develop how those connections go. So they're a little bit more authentic and students feel like they're connecting to people who are similar to them.
Fantastic, Nelson. Do you have any advice for folks who are thinking about which office should I reach out to first when you think about cross collaboration? Any advice or perspective, Nelson, that you would share as you've seen that change over time?
It really all depends what your target audience is, I would say. We know that like we want it like right now we are in the shift of like how do we find people who have created a culture on campus, right? So we're using that student activities and like COSO side and some of their leadership rosters to help recruit mentors for the next group to kind of push more of that like campus involvement and campus life. But if your target audience is like a specific demographic, people living on campus, people graduating, you have to basically go to where that route is. We started with commuters. A lot of our commuters are also first gen, so we really use first gen a lot early on. But as we've transitioned away from target recruitment in the sense of like these are the two groups we're trying to satisfy and more of like an open approach, that is very much ever changing with how the culture around mentoring goes for your specific entity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Nelson. Diamond, what strategies are used similar to Nelson on recruiting, training, and selecting mentors? I know you all have multiple programs on campus, so perhaps you can speak to that, Diamond.
Originally the opposite. So we were the blasting emails campus for the most part because this program originated where we were just kind of doing it on our own until one of our supervisors mentioned like there's this really great mentorship program out there. Let's, leverage the resources that they have to really help bolster and scale this. And so we were excited to really get the feedback from our students on campus once we did partner with you all. Students were just over eager about like volunteering their time and their knowledge with mentees, and we saw that to be something that was very useful and great to our campus community. And so we typically just recruit through normal fashion, but now we have utilized leveraging our campus partners since our relationships have formed in a far deeper dynamic, especially when it comes to just understanding the needs across campus. And it's really good to kind of hone in on those things and pull all those folks to the table. So we do leverage our campus partners in that capacity. It's really great partnering with you all because you all do a lot of the heavy lifting, especially when it comes to the onboarding and a lot of the automatic nudges for recruitment. And so we obviously leverage our partnership with Mentor Collective, and they attend the 30 to 40-minute asynchronous training. And so we've heard great feedback on how just simple and user-friendly the platform is. And so I think that also pulls our students and our mentors to want to give their time. It's not a lot of heavy lifting on their end.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Diamond. I think it's exciting to hear that multiple strategies were used, which is something I think that Nelson also referenced as well. Different offices, different communication methods have as those have changed, right? So thank you for sharing. Dr. Morgan, do you mind sharing, because you mentioned obviously that you have mentors who you're recruiting that are alumni. How do you do that? How do you make sure that those alums feel excited and ready to talk to students who might be of a different generation than they are? How have you thought about that at your institution?
So yeah, so we work very closely with alumni affairs to get a specific pool of alumni to serve as mentors to the students. And so when we were initially developing the program here on campus, alumni affairs and career services suggested that we use a target group of alumni. So we targeted our alumni from 2014 to 2022. And so those are the alumni that we use to currently mentor our cohort one. And so it's been very beneficial. The students have really spoke to the fact that they are able to kind of connect with their mentees because they're kind of closer in age, and they kind of can speak their language a little bit better. But what we did realize at the end of the cohort from speaking to the students who successfully completed the program is that they're looking to connect with alumni who are a little bit more seasoned in their career fields, who are like a supervisory level or that can kind of pull them up through the ranks as well. And so in our next cohort, we've pushed our alumni years back. And so we're recruiting from 1990 to present now.
It's exciting to hear how the feedback that you ingested from students created
Mhm.
immediate change in how you
Yes.
connected to students.
Mhm.
This is actually, I think, a great lead in or segue to what sort of outcomes have you observed for, whether it be resource utilization or student persistence, overall success? What sort of outcomes have you observed? And Jordan and Nelson, I'll kick this over to you first, because I think that you referenced, Jordan, in your initial introduction, your close relationship and excitement within your with Rebecca, your assessment. Gosh, I shouldn't say just professional. She does so many things, but would love to know a little bit about the outcomes that you all have seen and are looking even further to understand.
Yeah, we were asked to look at everything. So we measured persistence, we measured retention, and then because this launched in 22, and then we've had transfers go through the program, now we're starting to look at graduation rates. So persistence wise, the first year, or retention wise, excuse me, the first year when we looked at our first cohort, and we looked specifically at 23 to 24 once we had solidified that we were going to run with transfer connections. For first year connections, we had a 2% lift in retention. For transfer, we had almost a 7. And our transfer population is the one that we were unintentionally targeting because we looked at commuter men, but we didn't realize the transfer population that was a part of that. So that was like an unintentional outcome that turned into one of our bigger programs on campus. And then institutional research also looked at the ROI, so the return on investment for what cost-wise we were saving by retaining all of these students, and it came out to like a projected revenue of over $2 million in under 5 years. So the amount of data we were able to provide is also how we concurrently continue to get funding from the university. And I would say that is the biggest reason why this partnership has been able to succeed and work, because we're speaking about this at basically any table we get invited to speak at. And therefore the funding went beyond our division of student affairs and it became a university-wide initiative. And now it was more than just, okay, let's do this pilot for 3 years. Let's see if this works. And now we have this long-term investment of how we're going to grow mentorship and do some of that culture work that Nelson mentioned earlier on. So yeah, anything and everything you can measure is what you should be doing.
I think my takeaway from that, Jordan, is that you cast a wide net. There were questions that you were trying to answer, but you all maintained an open mind to see what sorts of things do we learn from our data that we didn't know that was a wonderful side effect. And that's an exciting part of a project and a journey like this. Diamond, I know that you all work closely with your assessment folks at your institution. Any outcomes that you all have seen so far, or if not, are looking to better understand in the future?
Yeah, so actually pretty similarly to what Jordan mentioned. So just over the years, we started to see like a steady fall to winter semesterly persistent rates, looking at our program participants versus our non-program participants. And our program participants were always about roughly at 89%, where our non-participants were about 83.5. So yeah, we've seen that, and that's been steady, I would say, over the course of the years that we've been in partnership with you all. And so we found that those who truly take advantage of the experience of what mentorship has to offer, we typically see that higher yield of engagement and higher yield of retention. And so just through these efforts, we were able to accumulate campus buy-in, and expanding this opportunity to our graduate programs, and then also building out that career readiness component with our alumni population. So yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
no
Absolutely.
problem.
I'm going to talk a little bit about now the impact of peer mentorship on the sense of belonging, because obviously we love and are excited about persistence and retention and reducing melt, and that's really important. And for some of our institutions, that is the most important thing. And other institutions say, yes, that is important, and we want to understand our student sense of belonging. We anecdotally know that perhaps students who either live close to campus or have certain attributes aren't feeling connected and have lower levels of resource utilization. So maybe I can ask you all to speak. Dr. Morgan, how have you measured the impact of peer mentorship on those first year students that you've talked about, their sense of belonging? What do you hear from students? What sort of data are you looking to collect? I would love to hear from you first, Dr. Morgan. Yeah.
So yeah, so we're gonna do a satisfaction survey with them next week. Actually, yesterday our first cohort actually graduated through our program, and so we did a little ceremony for them. We have a program on campus called FIC, which is the Freshman Innovation Council, and so beginning this initiative with Mentor Collective, we actually went back to the drawing board and refined our Freshman Innovation Council program. And so we added the mentorship component to that program. So all of our students who are engaged in the FIC are also engaged with the Mentor Collective. And so with that, they are matched with a alumni mentor from the Mentor Collective side, and then they're also matched with a peer mentor from our campus. And the peer mentors are made up of our student leaders, so student government, resident assistants on campus, and we have some other student leaders from other areas of the campus as well. And so throughout the academic year, we meet twice a month with them to just kind of do some experiential learning, some projects, and then they meet aside from that with their peer mentors, and then of course they meet with their alumni mentors and record those notes through the Mentor Collective platform. And so a lot of the feedback that we're getting from them is that they're from the peer mentorship side, it's increasing their visibility on campus, their engagement, not just with the program, but their engagement with registered student clubs and organizations. We're seeing more of an uptick in University College with their engagement with their academic advisors, and so that's also a lesson learned that I guess we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But that was a lesson learned that we really learned this year, engaging academic advisors, right? And so it's been really, really good as far as the feedback that we receive from the students. And then we also get feedback from our alumni mentors throughout the year, whether it's a flag or whether they just want to shoot a message to say, hey, my mentor participated in this event that was off campus and they did such a great job. And I've even gotten a email from a mentor asking if they could come to campus to meet with the mentee in person, instead of just phone calls or Zoom sessions that they've been having. So I thought that was very interesting that the mentor asked if they can come to campus to, physically meet their mentee to further enhance their experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Morgan, I'll take advantage of that door that you just opened to talk about challenges and lessons learned in scaling your
Mhm.
mentorship program and allowing it to evolve over the course of time. You talked about the connection and feedback to academic advisors. Nelson, can you speak a little bit to what challenges and lessons you all have learned as your program has changed over the course of time, as you've collaborated with more offices? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think the one that we are seeing a lot lately, which is a good problem to have, is how much mentorship is affecting our students and how much more they want it, right? Like we are in peak of trying to like recruit mentors for next year. And as we talk to our first year students, they're like, well, I wish I can have like a mentor again next year, right? And like be able to do that part as well, which is interesting. We're obviously starting conversations, and we can dive into this a little bit later when we talk about like what does the future look like. But there's conversations about expanding mentoring towards our sophomore populations and our upperclassmen as well, outside of our like incoming transfers. I think another challenge we are also facing is how do we develop our mentors, right? We've had mentors who reach out to us for like reference letters, and this is their involvement because it doesn't require too much of a haul. It's not like a full commitment to a club and organizations. So how do we take away from it just being a mentee experience and try to really develop the mentor? We recently onboarded an additional staff member, and that's some of the ideas we've started conversations around, like mentor webinars to just make sure that they can feel connected to the institution and feel like they are getting stuff out of this as well and not just the mentees.
Yeah, we know mentors have a high impact practice to themselves, right? Which is not just giving the mentee opportunities to persist and retain, but also their own leadership development and their own self efficacy and how they navigate those relationships. Diamond, anything that you want to talk about with lessons learned, challenges that you pass on to attendees as you all scaled your program? You mentioned you added a graduate program and now you're working with upperclassmen students to connect them to alumni. I'm sure you have experiences to share as well.
Yeah, so that last point, yeah, it was actually a challenge at first because while this was just catered to our FIDIAC and new transfer students for our undergraduate program, what caused the need for that career alumni was like our upperclassmen coming to us like, well, we want to be menteed as well. They want to have a chance. So coming from that mentor to actually being a mentee and giving them mentor to have that sense of development by being a mentee to an alumni mentor. And so that was a challenge that we incurred and then had to kind of develop as we had to figure out which way we were going to go with how we wanted to scale our programs. And then I would say another was I talked about like having that campus buy-in more so at the leadership level, but really getting campus buy-in on a more granular level. Everybody at our institution is they're very protective of their students within their respective schools and colleges. And so just kind of crossing over the threshold to really build that trust and true partnerships with our campus partners, and really working with them to figure out what does mentorship look like for their students at in their respective colleges and schools, to making sure that we were on the same page about the data that they wanted to collect or what they wanted engagement to look like for their students and the outcomes that they were interested in. And so that was a little bit of a challenge, just kind of finding a happy medium just to make sure that um, they knew that they were also a part of the conversation about what mentorship looked like as a whole.
Absolutely. Dr. Morgan, would you like to add anything from a lesson that you've learned throughout this year? You mentioned a connection to academic advisors. Anything that you'd like to add as you scale your program?
Yeah, I think that through the recruitment process and even during like the initial implementation, having key campus partners and stakeholders at the table will serve you justice as you develop the program and its longevity on your campus. For us, we found that initially we didn't really engage academic affairs throughout our implementation process. And so including department deans or chairs, or even the academic advisors, having them at the table, because that buy-in allows for the program to grow on your campus. And so while an academic advisor may be in a session with the student one-on-one discussing their academic trajectory and their course schedules, that advisor can recommend to them being a part of the Mentor Collective program and matching them, connecting them with an alumni in that academic field. And so knowing that now on the back end, that helps us out on our recruitment side, growing the program, because now we have a pathway into connecting with that student that we may not have necessarily had from just maybe meeting that student at a table event when there's so many students, around asking questions. So really just speaking to, Jordan and Diamond, as their point that they made earlier, just having like that campus buy-in and those campus partnerships throughout the process is an asset to really longevity and sustaining the program on your campuses.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to move on to the next question, which I think we have touched on in a couple of points in this conversation, which is how do your mentorships programs work alongside with and in parallel to other student support services like your wellness offices, tutoring, career centers, maybe a first generation office, to create a more integrated student success network? And how did those conversations start with those individuals? How do you continue to maintain strong relationships with those other offices as your programs change over the course of time? Nelson, I'll start with you because you showed a lot of passion and excitement and energy for maintaining those connections to other campus departments and made it sound like those are integral to your program success. Do you mind speaking to this first?
I'll take it from the
Yeah,
the
please.
partner one was something that I originally set up, so that's why I said I'll steal it. But I know some on this call don't yet have a mentoring program, but what worked for us specifically with Mentor Collective was the flagging system. And that's the piece of it I really took hold of early on in getting set up. But for us, the flagging system is really an alert system that allows a mentor to log a conversation, and you can choose whether it's an immediate priority, or I guess non-immediate priority. Thanks, Jess. And in it, the immediate priority ones, we were originally getting all of them directly sent to our office, and we decided to host basically like a workshop for our campus partners that said, okay, a mentor might say one of the flags is categorized as housing insecurity. So it doesn't make sense that it's coming through our office. It should be going directly to the dean of students, or it should be going directly to housing. So we basically workshopped around, these are the options of categories. Is there a way that you all would be able to support this going directly to you? So we tried it. In the first week of school, they were able to intervene a lot faster than what we were used to. So there's the Maxient reporting right through most of our Dean of Students office or some kind of reporting system, but this was another way we could catch students from their peers. And I saw a question in the chat about if there's faculty staff. Our Transfer Connections is only faculty and staff mentors. So for those faculty and staff, it was a much quicker way for them to just quickly log a conversation versus doing the full reporting and saying, hey, this is the first week. Not sure if this is going to be a concern, but it might be. So we were able to jump in and get some of that early intervention going.
Thank you so much for sharing. Diamond, anything you'd like to augment or add? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So we really wanted to hone in on that wraparound support service. So we did something similar. I would say triaging those priority flags are really useful in sense of partnering with folks. I could speak to one example. So like working with our academic advisors that are on campus. And so if something comes across when the mentors do submit those priority flags as an academic concern or struggle, we've developed a referral system. And so we would, just because there were some technical difficulties, which I said it can be a challenge for how those insight flags are dumped, because we first thought about doing it through like directly to like our CRM. But sometimes, just trying to trifle with all the technical difficulties, it can come as an issue. So we developed a referral system where anything that comes across, like I said, as a concern or academic struggle, I can then send a referral to that advisor specifically or even general advisor or faculty advisors for that student. And the advisors can, at their discretion, address that concern with how or struggle with how they see fit. And so that allows us, for those who do have that wealth of knowledge and professional experience, to address those things head on.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan, anything you'd like to add?
I'll piggyback, I guess, off of Jordan. And so my favorite feature in the platform is the alert system where our mentees, I should say, can flag us. And so to me, it's very valuable for us because we use it for our alumni mentors. And so our alumni mentors don't have access to like our initial university platform systems to like report certain things. And so like we use Navigate EAB on campus. And so our alumni mentors don't have access to Navigate EAB. And so for them to submit flags through the Mentor Collective portal, we also triage ours. So if something comes up that's connected to like housing insecurities or food insecurity or a mental health situation, it sends it directly to those specific areas on our campus. And so I'm also alerted any flag that comes through, I get alert for, but it also goes to those specific areas as well. And so we've had a few situations where our mentors have flagged, and we were able to immediately jump into that situation and resolve the situation. Our academic advisor with the university college, they're also connected in that flag system. So if it's something related to like academics, or if they need accommodations or something of that nature with our well-being area, then we can immediately get to it. So the flag system is something that's very unique, especially in the mentorship space. I think that's just a great resource and tool for us here on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
I think that we were on this topic of, sharing data with other offices on campus and ensuring that people have a stake and voice and understanding the student's experience and wanting to understand if there are alerts, successes, things that students are stumbling on. I want to pivot for a second and talk about what advice you all would give in folks. We mentioned that about half the folks here have a mentorship program and half don't. So what advice would you all share for individuals who are either have an existing mentorship program and are preparing to talk to assessment folks, institutional research folks, institutional effectiveness folks? What advice would you give to them in preparing for those conversations? I truly believe that everyone wants to promote their value of mentorship both qualitatively and quantitatively, that needs to often partner with other offices on campus to do that. So what advice would you give to them preparing in those conversations? Jordan, I'll start with you since I know you have really strong partnerships with your assessment team on campus.
Yeah, I honestly started by building that relationship. I think the assessment team is the number one start there. My predecessor was on her way out, but she had been trying to bring Mentor Collective to campus for years prior to that. And she was finally moving on some data. So she was like, the first thing you're going to do in your first week when I leave here is go to lunch with the assessment team. So that's what I did. And then it just happens that we also are neighbors in the office now. So we started there, and then both of us also sit on a group called SWAT, which sounds really serious, but it's the Strategic Working Group Ascending to the Top. That's what that means. And then the CFO sits on it, and that's what matters here. So we had been saying, like, we want to bring this forward. What do we need in order to get approval here? And they were like, these were the main strategic priorities that they were heading. If you can prove any of these, then you're likely going to get the funding. So we just worked towards that, had a seat at the table, and then started speaking about it. So I would definitely say start with just making the connection, the relationship first, and then use the people, especially the assessment side of the house, to start to prove, because it's hard to doubt the numbers when you have them. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pivot to our next question because we've only got about 12 minutes left. I want to make sure we also get to some of the questions in that chat. Nelson, I'll give this one over to you or Jordan, or both of you, since you both have great expertise in this area. What advice would you look for institutions, about half the audience is looking to potentially launch their first mentorship program? What advice would you give them if they're doing so with limited resources? I don't know if anyone is robust with resources, but let's assume maybe it's a little bit more limited. So Nelson, maybe if you could go first, what advice would you give them in looking to launch something like this with limited resources?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about relationships, right? But I'm an athlete nature, so like in my mind is like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So just like take it and have conversations. I'm gonna be fully transparent. Like we do not have the budget to run mentoring by ourselves. It's very much the relationships we were talking about, right? But if Jordan and Jordan's predecessor and our assessment team would have never taken the chance to like bring it up to the academic side of the house and the financial side of the house of like this is what we think it can help, we would have never gotten there. So I think building those relationships is going to be important. The assessment team is our best friend. Like I don't do anything when it comes to mentoring without talking to Dr. Goldstein. Because I'm like, when people think about data, they get scared. Data is the only way that you can tell your story. So become friends with the people who know how to tell your story. And then second, don't be afraid of getting into those spaces because the worst thing they're going to tell you is no. But if you come with the data and you come with the information that you need to prove that point and establish what you want to get out of it, there's a high likelihood that they'll probably find a way to be able to support you.
Thank you for sharing. Diamond, anything you'd like to add to that as someone who's seen your programs grow over the course of time? What advice might you give with someone with limited resources looking to start?
Yeah, so first, 100% everything that Nelson mentioned. But I would say, yeah, for sure, sitting down with, like for us, it's our institutional analysis folks, and really kind of assessing those gaps and seeing like where can mentorship help with filling in those gaps, and looking at how we can further disaggregate that data. And then like obviously as you build, so like our student affairs funded that entire like first year for our program, but as we were kind of to build that data, tell that story, we were able to get that campus buy-in from our campus leadership, and they were really seeing again the ROI that can um, generate from this initiative. And so that was one thing that because I don't think just again for transparency, I don't think that our student affairs could singly like continue with our program single-handedly without our campus support.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to steal a question from the chat because Kawanda, I think it's such a wonderful one, and I don't want to save it for the Q&A in case folks have to jump early for a meeting. Dr. Morgan, I'll pose this to you first, but I imagine everyone has an opinion on this. Kawanda is looking for must-haves for our first mentor program. What's something we need to make sure we implement in our first attempt of establishing a peer mentor program for our first year students? Kawanda, wonderful question. I think just anecdotally from my perspective, Dr. Morgan, what would you say are one or two must-haves from your perspective for someone looking to get started? Yeah.
I would say developing like a full curriculum for the program, and having key stakeholders at the time. So you need a team to pull it off. So like for us within our program that we use within the Freshman Innovation Council, it's a mixture between a leadership curriculum. They do bi-monthly experiential learning activities, product development, and case study reviews. And then the mentorship is the last component that we recently added. And so it's kind of like a program they go throughout their first year. And we work with first year experience, student engagement, and SGA in our alumni affairs office to really pull it off. Institutional research works with us as far as collecting data, connecting us with some alumni contacts, and things of that nature. And so really the bulk of the work comes from the first year experience team and the Office of Student Engagement team to kind of pull off that first year peer mentorship program.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry, counseling services.
Love that. Love it. Sounds like your must-have is first identifying the key stakeholders that need to be a part of this conversation to make it flurry, and thinking about what curriculum can it create or infuse into. I love that. Jordan, would you mind sharing what your view on a must-have or must-haves are for someone looking to get started?
I was worried I was going to come after him, and I was trying to think of something. I think honestly, peer buy-in is something we haven't talked a lot about, but we were really worried that there weren't going to be peers that wanted to volunteer their time. Like Diamond mentioned earlier, like we were surprised by how many really wanted to volunteer their time towards this. It helps being in charge of orientation also because, we're able to recruit mentees pretty easily, but the mentors, we were not sure because for some of them, this was the first time they were hearing specifically from Nelson and I since they saw us at orientation. But they really bought in to the fact of like the way that you all, that Mentor Collective puts in that recruitment template is like, hey, don't you wish someone was there for you? And they were like, yes. So we've recruited a really strong cohort that's really like stayed on, but again, it's also causing questions of how do we continue to support our mentors and engage mentoring well beyond their first year. So the need is also, in addition to the campus partners, the peer mentors, and Nelson unmuted, so he's either gonna
Yeah, I'm
correct
probably
me
gonna
or
add to
add
it.
something.
No, add. I think Jordan hit it right on the noggin. I think the other part when we think about peers is that like Mentor Collective makes a good job about it not feeling like a hall, right? Like I feel like sometimes when we talk to our students, they are like, well, I want to do stuff, but we have like a large commuter population, right? So we have these students that like work and are not here all the time. So mentoring has allowed them the capacity to feel like they're involved without having to be like here 24/7. Does it make sense where like some other involvements work? So yeah, the peer-to-peer is cool because honestly, like I tell the orientation leaders this, uh like I'm not that old, but to some of these students, I'm like old. And they don't want to hear my voice. Like they want to hear from like the students themselves. So making sure that you have that like student to student connection is really important because that's what's going to keep students retained within the program and see the vision a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Nelson. We're going to try and squeeze in one more question. So I'm going to pose a big old question, but then give you all probably only a minute or about 45 seconds to give your elevator reaction to this. Curious what you all think you see as the future of peer mentorship in the next 5 years in response to changing student needs, in response to the dynamics in higher education changing. Certainly no one has a crystal ball in this room, but what does your gut tell you? Because you all are very experienced professionals. Nelson, I know you had a take on this, so I'll probably hand it over to you first if you don't mind. Your personal
Cool.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. At least on our campus, but I feel like across the board, um, I feel like coming out of COVID, people are really looking for those one-on-one connections. And I feel like mentoring puts that, and I feel like in 5 years, it's still going to be something that people are looking for. We are very much moving with our hope is to establish it across the board. We've talked a lot about our two mentor programs, but we are even in discussions about how do we bring 12 other mentor programs onto the mentor collective side and make it one executive dashboard to really build that culture and make sure that our students, our faculty, our staff, both in the mentee and mentor capacity feel supported throughout their whole time here at Florida Atlantic and really build a relationship and a culture from the moment that they step foot into their time as alumni. And I really think that's where our culture is. Our hope is when a student comes to Florida Atlantic, they know that mentoring is just the thing you have to do. And it's the thing that like makes an FAU out an FAU out.
Fantastic. Diamond, anything you'd like to add or share?
Yeah, sure. So we are really looking at the entire life cycle of a student from the time that they apply to the time that they're admitted, enrolled, orientation, all that, all the way up into the time they graduate and become an alumni. And so really honing in on those personal connections Nelson mentioned, especially like folks that are looking for engagement coming from like COVID. And I think even in this new age of technology, where a lot of our incoming freshmen, they are always in their phones, kind of the thing to do. And so this really helps students, especially like our first year students, understand like mentorships, like it's a necessary thing, fostering like having those true connections. It's a way of life. And it goes beyond outside of this institution, but even as you propel into your personal lives and your professional lives. And so I do see it evolving as a necessary need for our students just because of the popularity that this has built for on campus for our students. So I most definitely see it evolving into a very progressive thing.
Wonderful. Dr. Morgan, would you like to take it home?
Sure. So for us here at Lincoln, our COO, Chief Operating Officer, is actually working on an initiative. I think that speaks to your question, Jess. And so he's working on some cross-institutional initiatives that consist of peer mentoring. And so working with three other institutions, 4-year institutions, we're working to put together a peer mentoring program where students from each campus will work together to do some type of peer mentorship. And so they're in the works of kind of establishing that now to have the start date for August 1st this fall. So I think that's kind of the trajectory of peer mentorship in my head, where it's just not on one respective campus, but we're able to kind of work together from multi institutions.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have a couple of questions from the audience, so we'll pivot to this in our last quick couple minutes here. Alexis had asked, does anyone have experience working with first-year graduate students as a target population? I think, Diamond, you all have a graduate program on campus. Would you mind speaking to that? Yeah.
Yeah, so our graduate program has scaled tremendously. And that really came through getting buy-in from our graduate programs office and working with the director over there. And so he was able to have those granular level conversations with the different program directors to really create that buy-in for the program, him kind of generating the data that, and the success that we had gotten with that first year like pilot program for our graduate students. And so that was able to generate a lot of momentum momentum where our directors were able to speak to the program, ambassadors were able to speak about the program. And so our program partners our first year graduate students with our continuing graduate students, and they're able to build their own community in itself within their individual respective programs.
Thank you for sharing. Um, Question from Amanda. Can anyone speak to mentoring programs for particularly institutional populations such as student athletes, theater students, etc.? I think many of you have these infused into your programs. I don't know if any of you have particular programs that focus on this, but I might be misremembering. Do you all, any of the panelists want to speak to particular populations like this?
We
Jordan?
oversee a council on campus. So our office leads the mentoring council. There's 14 programs across the university. So that's what Nelson was talking about. We're trying to bring them all under this umbrella. But I can post the link in the chat. It outlines our specific populations. Athletes are one of them, but they are through advising, and it's an NCAA requirement for them to participate. So we don't really count them as part of the council because they're not opting in. But there are several specific populations listed under there.
Thanks, Jordan, for wrapping that up. And then a question particularly for Dr. Morgan. What incentives or offerings do you provide for alumni to stay engaged with the mentee students? Would love to hear you speak about that if there's anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily offer incentives necessarily to the mentors. Was it for the mentors or the mentees? I'm sorry.
Mentors. Yep.
The mentors, yeah. So we don't necessarily offer incentives to the mentors. However, that is a good touch. But that's a good touch. But for right now, what we do is we highlight our mentors and our mentees. And so we do like testimonials where they're featured in one of the newsletters. Alumni Affairs has an alumni spotlight that they send out monthly. And so our mentors have been featured in that. And now we're collecting our testimonials to put on our campus screens around campus. So you may see like a picture of an alumni, then like a little blurb of their engagement with the student that they mentor on campus. And then if you go into another building, you'll see a picture of one of the current mentees and a blurb of their experience engaging with an alumni mentor. So that's kind of how we use that to, I guess, incentivize our engagement with our mentors on campus.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I know we are officially at a little bit over time here, so I'm going to wrap us up. Christine is going to send you all one more poll. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Mentor Collective, how we can support your goals around mentorship, whether that be workforce and career readiness, student success specifically, we're here to help you, absolutely. So thanks, Christine, for also asking that. I want to give a big, again, thank you to our panelists today for taking the time. There's commencement happening tomorrow and next week and orientation sessions and all the wonderful hustle and bustle and stress for the end of the year activities. So thank you to our wonderful panelists. We really appreciate them and their investment in Mentor Collective. So we couldn't do our work without them. We also want to remind you all that we really want to promote the insights in creating a culture of engagement and that culture of mentorship on campus. So I know earlier today, Christine had posted a link to our culture of mentorship white paper, but I also want to highlight, you can scan this code on the screen here that'll talk about how we understand maximizing student persistence and retention as a practice through mentorship. So also want to highlight this as a potential quick read. I know that we don't always have the gift of time, but I wanted to highlight this in case you've got some summer reading planned. And then also, again, thank you all so much for attending, for giving us your time, for giving the panelists their time, for being with us today. We hope to see you at a future Mentor Collective webinar and opportunity. Thank you again for joining and hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care.